The stories in this episode have been featured on the channel before in recent weeks. However, I've compiled all of them into one big compilation video, plus some new ones in the beginning to help you sleep or to help you work. One more thing. If you're listening on YouTube, I've placed one ad after the first 3 stories, and the remainder of the episode is entirely uninterrupted. And if you're listening on a podcast, I've placed the one ad break as early in the episode as my distributor will let me. Alright, so check this out. Water fell on my face while I was browsing my phone in bed. So here I was, at night, lying in the dark on my bed, quietly browsing my phone with the only light in the room being the glow on my face from the screen. And a splash. I felt about 300 milliliters of water land on my face and chest. What the F, I instinctively whispered loudly, thinking I was under attack but courteously not trying to wake anyone up. I was not. Once I had flicked on my phone flashlight, I had seen that there was nobody. Looking down again at my soaked bedsheets and wiping my face, I was still alone in this pin-drop silence. Surely, if somebody was there, I would have heard them. Besides, anyone who's gotten used to the acoustics of their bedroom can hear a penny drop. And me? I heard absolutely nothing. I have absolutely no explanation for it to this day. The Matrix got into a water fight with me, and currently it's 1-0. Why couldn't it have been gold? But with full respect to the Matrix, I'm grateful it wasn't acid. I saw a house that doesn't exist. Every day, I walk my dog around my neighborhood. Since it's a route that I always take, I know the houses that I pass. Yesterday, I was walking my dog and I passed a different house. I found it strange at first, but nothing that caught my attention. The house was old, and I could see inside, and there was a seamstress working. The car parked in the garage was also old. She had a very sweet dog who came to greet my dog at the gate. The lady saw me, smiled, and greeted me too. Today, when I went for a walk with my dog again, I couldn't wait to pass this house again and see the nice lady and her good boy. That's when the unexpected happened. Instead of the house that I had just seen, there was a completely different one. What happened? Where did it go? I still don't understand. A child I'd never seen before knows me and my mother's name. Quite a while back, my mom was taking me to get a checkup on my right foot because I tore a ligament in it jumping off my high school bleachers a week or so before. We were going to a doctor that I'd never been to before. It wasn't my usual primary care provider, as he recommended us to this place. The lobby was fairly busy, but not overflowing with people. In this flux of people was a little boy and his father, both of whom my mom nor I had ever, and I mean ever, met. Out of the blue, while getting in line to check in, this boy looks at us and says my name and my mother's name. Very childishly, not sing-songy, but also not monotone. My mom looks at me and asks, "Did that little boy just say our names?" And after asking me that, he and his father were taken to the back as it was their turn to be seen. I never saw them come out, and I never saw them again. To this day, I replay this scene and wonder what the heck that was about. I've never asked my mom about it since then, but maybe I should. Woman sitting next to me thanked me by my name after I helped her. This was back in the day when there were a lot more internet cafes about. I'm sitting there, minding my own business, This woman comes in and sits next to me. She needs help with something on the computer, so I go ahead and try to assist. As she gets up to leave, she says, "Thanks," and then calls me by my name. Now, there was no way on earth that she could have guessed my name because it's pretty unusual and it's not British, which is where this event took place. And she's not where I'm from either. I turned to her and I said, "How do you know my name?" And she replied, "Oh, you just look like a," and then said my name again. So weird, and I've never forgotten that. This person includes an edit that says, "For some context, I was born and brought up in the UK and actually look quite British because of the lightness of my skin. A lot of people seem bemused when I tell them that I've not got a single drop of British blood in me. But my heritage is Iranian, Lebanese, and my name is not one that's ever chosen by people who are British. And the woman in question was not Middle Eastern or Iranian." Somebody in the comments says, "You're welcome, Truman." I have something special for you that I want to tell you about. It's a daily liquid shot that's called Magic Mind. I've been drinking it every day for 6 months now, and it's certainly changed my life. I feel like my sleep is better, I'm more creative, I'm more productive when I need to be. And it's not just me that sees these benefits either, it's New York Times best-selling authors. They say things like drinking Magic Mind lifts their brain fog and helps them conquer their to-do lists with less distractions. Professional athletes mention how Magic Mind keeps them locked into a focused state whether they're playing the sport or working on their next big project. Even the founders of incredibly innovative websites say that incorporating Magic Mind into their daily routine has become a ritual that fuels their productivity and creativity. But don't forget, it's not just for the over-performers at the top of their business level. It's for regular people too. I mean, I drink this stuff every day for 6 months and I get those same benefits that they do. And really, I'm just a normal guy that knows how to read. If you feel like you need any aspect of your life improved, whether it's better sleep, less stress, more productivity or creativity, or just overall vibes, try Magic Mind. This one drink will do it all. Get yours at 20% off right now by going to magicmind.com/scarystories and use my code SCARYSTORIES20, that's SCARYSTORIES20 at checkout for 20% off. You'll thank yourself later. Popcorn Girl Disappearance. This happened last summer, and it still puzzles my wife and I to this day. So, the two of us were out around mid-afternoon, walking around the downtown area of our town. The street we were on was straight, with only a few shops to one side of us, and the road on the other. And across the road, there was a large field with some people roaming about. As we walked, a girl carrying a tray of popcorn came towards us. She was wearing a teal shirt, black pants, and an apron. There was a logo on her shirt, and it was for the local shop that sold snacks and such. She offered us a sample of the popcorn, and I took it, thanking her as she walked past the two of us. My wife ate a piece, and she immediately went to turn to compliment the girl on the popcorn, but she was gone. We were dumbfounded. Eating the popcorn and turning back took maybe 10 to 20 seconds. She wasn't just further up the road, she wasn't crossing the road, and the two shops that were next to us were closed. She wasn't in the field across the way, and my first thought was that she ran, but her tray was full of sample cups, and they would have spilled if she took off, and there was nothing on the ground. There were no alleyways that she could have slipped into either. To me, it seems like she simply just glitched out of reality. We get a little additional information in the comments. Somebody asks, "Did you guys ask the other shop employees whether they had a girl fitting her description? that worked there, or whether they had someone who distributed popcorn outside? OP responds with, yes. We did ask about the samples, and they said that they've only been giving them out right outside the shop, not over by where we had been walking. Some very inquisitive person responds, well, she could have just taken the initiative to walk further. What about the description of the girl? I'm just thinking that first thing I'd do is want to confirm that she even worked there, because if she didn't, that would add to the mystery. OP responds with, well, my wife asked the cashier, and they told her that nobody worked there that resembles the girl that gave us the popcorn. Another person adds, it's an unfortunate trope of paranormal or glitchy stories like this that people throw away any evidence that they have because they don't think much of it. Did you keep the cups? OP responds with, yes, they still have the cup. My patient freaked me out. I've been debating whether or not to share this, but it's been on my mind for a long time. So here it goes. This incident happened about 3 years ago. I work in healthcare as a patient care technician. It's basically a CNA, but in a hospital instead of a nursing home. During this particular night shift, my responsibility was to sit with a confused patient to keep him safe. He had dementia, so he would try to get up, wander around, or even pull out his IVs. My job was to make sure that he didn't get up on his own, to prevent falls, and to keep him from pulling out any lines. This kind of sitter role is pretty common for confused people in hospitals. This patient was in his 80s, and he was so confused he didn't even know his own name or where he was. During the shift, things were going pretty smoothly. He fell asleep around 11 p.m., but then woke up pretty close to 1 a.m. and looked over at me. To get my attention, he said, "Hey, Victoria." Now, that's not my name, but since he was confused, I didn't think much of it at first. I told him my actual name, and then I asked if he needed anything, but he continued to call me Victoria at least 3 more times. Now, here is where it gets, well, let's just say, very strange. My parents almost named me Victoria. It came down to either that or my real name. They ultimately chose what I call myself today because my dad simply wasn't a fan of Tori spelling. And the two names aren't even similar. I asked the nurse if this patient had any family members named Victoria, or maybe had a previous nurse that went by that name, but there was no connection. No family, no spouse, no prior caregiver with that name. Trying to shake off the odd feeling, I told myself that it was, probably just his confusion. But a short while later, he started singing the theme song to the Beverly Hillbillies. And that's when I really got the chills. When I was little, my parents used to recite that theme song as if it were a bedtime story when my siblings and I asked for a story. The whole situation just gave me this eerie feeling, like this man somehow knew things about me, even though we had never met. I mean, there's no way that he could have known any of my family. This was in my college town, far, far from where I grew up. I don't know. I might be overthinking it, but still, years later, I think about this night and the unsettling feeling that it gave me. Has anyone experienced anything similar or have any thoughts on this? I would love to hear some insights. Scary doppelganger in my town. I, a 21-year-old female, live in a town of about 50,000 people. Over the last year, I've had people come up to me at work and ask if I just got a new job. Confused, I say, "No?" Well, a few months ago, my mom calls me and asks if I'm in a local pet store where my dad is shopping. And I say, again, "No." And my mom sends me a picture of who I even thought was me. I looked at the picture and was wondering if I'd lost a bit of weight. I looked good, and then I asked her where that picture was from, and she told me that my stepdad just took it while shopping. Apparently, he thought it was me and walked up to her and started talking to her, only to realize that that wasn't me. Now here's where it gets weird. As if taking pictures of strangers in public isn't already weird. Don't do that. Now here's where it gets weird. I'm covered in deep self-harm scars, and the girl in the photo has the same scars as I do. I have a snake tattoo on my right arm, and so does she. Same style, everything. She also had the exact same glasses on that I wear daily. She was even wearing an outfit that I've worn before. Now, I have this picture of this woman who lives in my town who looks scarily just like me. I really want to meet her. I started asking people what her name is and explaining that I have a doppelganger. Her name sounds like Carrie, but it isn't Carrie. I can't remember what the woman who came into work a few weeks ago said her name was. I don't know if I'm losing my mind, but there's just too many coincidences here. I am a micro-celebrity on TikTok. Do I have a stalker who's obsessed and wants to be me? Or maybe an old friend who, just follows my moves? I know it sounds like I'm going crazy, but even I thought this woman was me. It's been weighing on my mind for months, and I just need to know, has anyone else had something like this happen to them? I think I teleported. I was telling a friend about this experience, and they directed me here to share it with you. In November of 2019, before anyone knew about COVID-19 in the UK, both my fiancé and I had it. We didn't know what it was until months later, though. COVID hit my fiancé much worse than me, and all she wanted to do was eat pastry. I was actually able to get out of bed, so while I still felt like death, I felt like a walk to the store was still pretty doable for me, especially as I could just take the bus home. The walk from the house to the store would take 35 minutes on a good day. I'm chronically ill with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, and I promise these small details, they are important. The walk to the store took me a little longer as I had to keep stopping to hack up a lung and catch my breath. I acquired the pastries and some throat medication before making my way to the bus station beside the store and finding that the buses weren't running properly because so many drivers were off due to sickness or whatever this virus was that was going around. We didn't know anything about COVID-19 until February 2020. So, I text my fiancé right as I start walking away from the bus station, letting her know that I'll be walking, so I'll be back when I'm back. She replied almost immediately with an "okay," and to take my time. I put in my headphones and started my music, which I remember distinctly was a 10-minute song, and I began walking. I remember reaching the edge of the store building and turning a corner, and then I remember walking up my garden path and opening the front door of the house. My fiancée had come downstairs to get a drink and was extremely confused when she saw me. She told me to check the time on the message that I had sent, and the message that I had sent her to say that I was on my way home had been sent only 6 minutes ago. There's physically no way that I could have made it home. An easy 3-kilometer walk. I mean, we play Pokemon Go, so we knew roughly the distance is 6 minutes. Even if I ran, there's no way that I could have made it home in that short amount of time. I was still only halfway through the song that was playing when I set off. I wasn't particularly out of breath. I didn't have a coughing fit upon arrival home, and that walk back always usually broke me out in a sweat, but I wasn't sweating. The only explanation that I can come up with is that I just somehow teleported. Anyone have any thoughts? My sister and I heard the same thing just to realize it didn't actually happen. I'll start with what happened first, and then some context afterwards, because I don't want this all over the place. I'm prone to doing that when writing. This happened 3.5 years ago when I was in the 10th grade and my sister was in the 9th. My sister and I were in my room after school one day, making stupid videos and doing dumb crap that we couldn't usually do when our mom was home, like misbehave. We both heard the front door open and close, and we both heard my mother say, "Girls, I'm home." So we look at each other and we immediately stop what we're doing, which was wasting some of her medical gloves making blow-up glove chickens. We throw them to the side and we go into the living room and kitchen area to greet her and to not have her walk in to see the gloves, and my door was open, which is why I was so scared that she'd see. Only, we didn't see her. So we check in her room, she's not there either. We check the backyard, not there either. My sister then opens the front door to check the front yard, and then informs me that our mother's car isn't even in the driveway. I figured she had left to go to the store, but I was a little bit put off by how fast it all happened. And I hadn't even heard her leave, but I don't know. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I call my mom to ask her if she had been home at all. At this point, I'm in my front yard with my sister, staring at an empty driveway as my mother tells me that she hasn't even left work yet, as it was only about 4:30, and she usually gets off at 5. She'd gotten worried and asked why I had to call and ask if she'd come home yet, so I explained. My sister and I were very weirded out, and we couldn't stop talking about it to each other for weeks afterwards because it was just so weird. I still think about this a lot. Now, my sister and I occasionally bring it up, and we just can't explain what happened because we both clearly heard it and it sounded so normal, and we truly just thought that we were going to get caught because my mom came home early. It was so weird. Here are some things that might help understand the situation and provide some context. We did have carbon monoxide detectors because I've actually brought this incident up with a friend once, and they brought up carbon monoxide as a possible explanation. And while it makes the most sense that carbon monoxide would explain why both my sister and I heard this, we had functioning detectors. We have someone in the comments suggesting that this may be a time slip, and they encourage the OP to ask their mother about a time that she came home, announced that she was home, and thought that she heard you guys playing in the bedroom, and then checked only to find that you weren't there. I nearly met myself. Alright, this happened about 2 months ago, and I haven't stopped thinking about it. After stumbling across these glitch in the Matrix videos that I see on YouTube. Hey, guys, do you think she's talking about me? Let's keep going. Anyway, after stumbling across these glitch in the Matrix videos on YouTube, I thought I'd share my story with you all. I've got no explanation, but maybe one of you do. I need to know if anyone else has ever had something like this happen to them. I work a pretty boring 9-to-5 job in a mid-sized office building. Every day, I go to the same coffee shop across the street at around 2 p.m. for my caffeine fix. I'm such a regular there that the barista, Sam, automatically starts making my order when he sees me in line. On this particular day, I left my office a little later than usual, around 2:15, and when I reached the door in the lobby, I realized that I'd left my key card on my desk on the other side of the building. But that was no problem. The secretary, Sarah, signed me out on paper. I mean, this happens all the time. As I crossed the street and I approached the coffee shop, I saw myself. I saw me wearing the same clothes, holding the same bag, same everything, standing at the counter inside the coffee shop, chatting with Sam. I froze, and my heart starts racing, but my brain was like, no, you've got to be imagining this. Maybe it's someone who just looks like you. But then this other me turned slightly, and I got a perfect look at their face. It was my face, even down to the tiny birthmark that I have under one of my eyes. I panicked. I turned around and I walked back across the street without going inside. My hands started to shake, and I kept telling myself that it wasn't real, that I must have been overtired or overworked or something. But here's the thing. When I got back to my desk and I looked in my bag, the coffee cup was there. The exact same coffee that I was planning to order, with my name written on it in Sam's handwriting. But I never went into that coffee shop that day. I never bought the coffee that I was now holding. But there it was, hot and fresh like I had just picked it up. I looked up at the clock and the time was still 2:15. It's the usual time that I'd get back after heading over and grabbing my coffee when I leave on time. But I'd definitely been outside for longer than a minute. It was like, my timeline diverged. One version of me had split away at 2 p.m. and gone to grab the coffee, while I had stayed behind, and then when returning to the building, our timelines had merged again. Even scarier than this thought was which one that I had been at the time. Was I the original me, or was I some sort of duplicate for that time? I spent the rest of my workday just feeling very off about the whole thing. I didn't even drink the coffee. It got me wondering about the stories of shapeshifters or doppelgangers that I've heard in the past, and I had to wonder if this is where some of those stories came from. Maybe two timelines split or converge, and you can be in two places at once, at least for a short time. I wonder how many times this sort of thing happens without us noticing. I haven't told anyone at work about this because, well, let's be real. They think I'm insane. But the secretary at the office does remember me heading out, and she remembers me having forgotten my key card. But she says that it happened at 2 o'clock, and it even says so on the log where she signed me out. I've gone back to that coffee shop since, and everything's been normal. Though, weirdly enough, Sam didn't remember me coming. The next day, when I went to grab my coffee, he asked if I'd been off sick the day before. So, if he never gave me that coffee that day, where did the coffee in my bag come from? Some parallel universe that collided with this one just for a split second? How can him and Sarah remember things so differently? And which one of them is even real? I don't know, but I still have the cup, and I wrote on it in red marker, "This came from nowhere." It's in my kitchen cupboard now. I keep checking on it just to remind myself that I didn't imagine the entire incident. But what the heck happened? I saw my mom's ex after he died, and this is not a ghost story. This happened a few years ago, and whenever it gets to be this time of year, I remember it because his birthday is coming up. My mom had an ex, who I'll call Jay just for this, who she was with for a few years. He was like a stepdad to me, and we didn't always get along. I mean, me being an angry teenager and him not being the easiest person. But in the time before he passed, which was of a sudden heart attack at age 49, our relationship got better, which made it much worse when he was suddenly gone. He died in 2013. Sometime after that, I can't remember really how much time had passed, but it must have been about a year or so. I was doing some grocery shopping. The supermarket was nowhere near where Jay used to live or work. It was a sunny, warm day, and I was done with my shopping and had just returned my cart and was making my way across the parking lot back to my car when I saw a car of the same make, model, and color like his. Not too unusual, I guess, but then a guy dressed the same way that Jay used to dress was walking up to it. I just saw him from behind at the moment. Black jeans, black t-shirt that was tucked in, a leather belt, same haircut. I thought, okay, that's not really a weird way to dress. It could be any guy. And the haircut and the hair color weren't particularly rare either. He opened the door to his car, turned around like he knew I was watching, smiled at me, and then waved at me. Then he got in. I couldn't move. I was shocked. I then hastily walked back to my car. I thought it couldn't be him. There's no way. Now, when I originally parked my car, I had backed into the spot. So when I sat down in my car, I could see the other cars coming and going. I opened my window because I had to gather myself for a moment, and it was hot in the car. And then I saw his car leaving the spot. He had to drive past my car, so I got to get a closer look. He had a few feathers bound together with a leather strip hanging from his rearview mirror, like Jay always had. His window was down, and he was wearing sunglasses in the same shape and color like Jay used to. He looked exactly as I remembered him, and he was blasting one of Jay's favorite songs on the radio. He again smiled and waved at me as he drove away. I must have sat there for a half an hour. I was at his funeral. He was cremated. I held his urn. We even cried and mourned his passing. My mom was there too, even though they weren't a couple anymore when he passed. But I had just seen him in broad daylight. The smiling and waving could have been because I was staring at him, and he might have been a random guy who just, felt flattered that a woman half his age was looking at him. But everything, every detail that I saw, was identical. Even the car was an older car, in a color that wasn't very common either. The clothing and the style were all the same. The sunglasses, the feathers, the music, even his mannerisms. The way he walked and waved and smiled, it felt unreal, like I had witnessed something that I should not have seen. Like I knew a secret. Also, him turning around when he was at his car and then looking at me like he knew me. Like he knew I was there. I have no idea what that was about. We have some back and forth in the comments about how some folks believe this is truly more terrifying than any scary story you'll come across on Reddit. And then some others voicing their opinions on how stories like this really show a moment of love and touching from the other side. And how it's a beautiful thing. I don't know. I just think it's very interesting how an experience can be taken in multiple ways and have seemingly polar opposite effects on who's experiencing them. Gate handle glitch. There's nothing too crazy here, but I'm honestly so stumped by what happened. A week ago, I was sweeping off the walkway at the side of my house after a stormy night. As I got to the gate, I noticed that the handle on the gate was missing one of the two screws that attached it to the wood gate. I checked the ground for the missing screw, but I couldn't find it. Upon closer inspection, it looked like a screw had never been installed at the top of the handle because there was no corresponding drill hole in the wood of the gate. I just assumed that I must have forgotten to add that screw when I had replaced the gate handle a few months earlier. It was a bit annoying because the screws came with a handle as a kit, and I had no idea where to find the screw or to get a matching replacement. A couple of days later, I went back out to the gate to get a better look at the remaining screw so that I could go find a replacement for the missing one. Here's the glitch. The handle was fully attached with two screws now. The handle was attached exactly as I believed that I had originally attached it. Nothing was missing. The screws on the handle were equally weathered and showed no signs of being tampered with. This person adds in the comments that they live alone and there's a 6-foot privacy fence between his house and his neighbor's house, and it's very unlikely for his neighbor to come over, find the missing screw, and replace it for him. How did it get back in there? Board game reappears. My boyfriend and I were looking for a game that we always play called Roll for the Galaxy. We have all of our board games on shelves in the basement, and we were looking for that particular game, but it wasn't there. And we both looked on the shelves multiple times, both separately and together on multiple occasions and on different days. We just couldn't find it. We assumed that, I don't know, maybe we lent it to one of his friends. It came up in conversation from time to time, with us just being a little bit sad that it was gone. It actually became a thing with us, talking about where it must have went. He ended up texting a bunch of friends to see if they had it. Here's a side note. On the shelves, it was clear that we had the game, Race for the Galaxy, but not Roll for the Galaxy, the one that we enjoy a lot more. So, one day, I was down in the basement checking our freezer to see what we had since we were having guests over. And I had been reading this particular subreddit a lot, and so I thought to myself, you know what? I bet if I check the shelves, the game will probably be there now. I checked, and it was. I called my boyfriend immediately to come and look, and he's a super rational person, but he couldn't believe it. He was freaked out. I have a picture to show how easily that it's spotted on the shelves, and that there's no way that we both could have missed it, especially after pouring through the games one by one. It's a bit spooky, and honestly, I keep on thinking that it might disappear again. Whenever I go down to the basement, I do a bit of an eyeball check to make sure that it's still there. Again, I just don't see how we could have missed it at all. But I swear, it wasn't there before. We have someone in the comments that replies, "Wow, this is really baffling. Where do these things disappear to? Is it ghosts? Alternate realities? Is it a timeline shift?" They said that this event has happened to them before too, and that they really just want some answers. Wrong bridge. This happened about 2 months ago. I was visiting my grandparents, who live in a rather labyrinthine complex of buildings, at least for me, who wasn't used to going there. Today, I could walk the path pretty well without my phone having to guide me, and I realized that what happened should not have happened, despite my poor sense of direction. To get to my grandparents' building, I have to take the bus to a high school. I cross a parking lot which takes me to a park. I cross that park and I reach a bridge over the highway. I then cross the bridge, which leads to a small football field on my right, which I only have to walk along to arrive in front of a children's play area which is behind my grandparents' building. The day this story takes place, I made my normal journey from the parking lot to the bridge above the highway. However, my memories are still very clear, and I'm pretty categorical. That damn football field was not there. There was only a small road with buildings on the other side. I had to go all the way around, relying on my phone, whose instructions didn't make sense, and finally I called my grandmother, who managed to guide me. In the evening, it was my grandfather who took me back in his car, and I didn't think about this story again until my next visit. I took that exact same path. I mean, it's the only path I know. I made no detour. Well, I passed the bridge, and there on my right is the football field. There's no small road, there's no buildings behind it, just the land to my right, a small park to my left, and the complex a little bit further on with this effing playground. It's impossible. There's only one park and one bridge. I couldn't have made a wrong turn. In fact, I never got lost again when going to my grandparents' building, and I never saw that street again. I never told anyone about this experience, and I just explained to my grandparents that I must have gone the wrong way, even though it's almost impossible to have gone wrong at this point. Even my grandmother, when I called to tell her that I was lost, asked me how I did my little trick. So that's my story. On this sunny afternoon, I crossed a bridge which led to a completely random street without this ever being possible. Sorry if it seems a little bit confusing, but I realize that telling it makes me a little bit uncomfortable, but I just needed to get it off my chest. Missing drill turned up nowhere near where it went missing. I had a glitch after my wedding. I hope this makes sense, but there are a lot of details, so follow me. For some background, our wedding was on my family's farm. It's about a 30-minute drive from where I live now. The reception was in the barn. My husband and I both drove there separately the day before the wedding, which was on a Friday, to do some setup, and on the wedding day, which of course was Saturday, as well. My husband's cousin and his girlfriend drove my husband's truck to his house the night of the wedding, which is in the same town that we live in. Anyway, the day after the wedding, which is Sunday, my husband stayed home to sleep off his hangover, and I went back to the farm to clean up. My brother-in-law and father-in-law took apart the bar with a cordless drill that belongs to my dad. We got all the cleanup done and we went home. As I was pulling into my driveway, my husband's cousin was pulling in as well to return the truck. His cousin didn't come for the cleanup as he was also nursing a hangover. My dad texted me later to ask where his drill was. I checked with the two who were using it, and they told me where they left it, but it wasn't there. We found it the following day in our truck under some stuff on the floor. I know for a fact that we used it on Sunday after the wedding when our truck was nowhere near there. I have no idea how it showed up in the truck now. I think about this sometimes, even 2 months after the wedding, and I'm still just as confused. We have somebody asking a question in the comments for some clarification. They ask, "Did you ask the cousin about the situation? Did the cousin's girlfriend help with the cleanup on Sunday? Did anyone from the cleanup crew on Sunday go to your cousin's house? Also, is it a completely different drill?" OP responds with all very valid suggestions and questions, but none of them are possible. It was only the people that I listed in the story that were there, and it was definitely the same drill. My brother-in-law doesn't drive, and I don't think he even knows where the cousin lives. He lives with his girlfriend and doesn't have people over there, as her grandfather lives there too. This is just truly a mystery. More proof that I've switched universes. I recently looked up on Find a Grave where my grandmother's old friend was buried, just out of curiosity, I guess. It also had her obituary and family members linked to her. Well, everything that I thought I knew was wrong. To my knowledge, she and her sister, who had Down syndrome or something similar, had lived together for years. Grandma's friend, I'll just call her Mary Jones, had been married, but I don't know if she was divorced or widowed, and the sister with Down syndrome, we'll call her Sarah Smith, never married. Last time I saw Mary, I was a teenager, or maybe just out of high school, and Sarah had passed away. She had moved from their house to, I believe, an assisted living home. Now, looking at the obituaries of her and the family members, I see that Mary was never married, and she died several years before Sarah. Sarah had been married, and no offense to anyone, but she couldn't have had Down syndrome because she was a postmaster of their town for over 40 years before she retired. I had met this lady many times, and you could definitely tell that she had some sort of mental disability. There were several other sisters, another one of which never married either, we'll call Joan, who died around the time that I thought Sarah did. But I had never heard of Joan before seeing her name under Mary's Find a Grave link. It was always just Mary and Sarah. Sarah had Downs, and they lived together until Sarah died. I honestly feel like I'm losing my mind sometimes, especially after finding all of this out. I saw a coworker, but they weren't really there. I've been working at this place for only almost a month, and it's weirdly already casually happened 2 times. I can't recall much about the first time, and I've only remembered it because I texted my sister after I got off work the day that the second incident happened, and her reaction had been, "Hasn't that already happened?" But yeah, basically, what happened the second time was that I was about to start my shift at 8 a.m. I saw a coworker on the escalator going up as I was about to go through the hall towards the employee kitchen. At 10 a.m., I was waiting for her to show up at the meeting, but she didn't. I thought, okay, maybe she was doing other things. Until I saw on the schedule that she wasn't coming in until 12 noon. And another weird thing was when I supposedly saw her, the escalator was working, right? But the thing is, they don't get turned on until 9:45 a.m. So what on earth happened there? This person includes an edit that says, "I talked to my coworker about it because I was so freaked out, and she said that it could have easily been someone that just looked like her. We work in retail, and we don't open until 10, So it was just the people working there who would have been there between 8 and 10 that I could have possibly seen. Not only that, but one that could have remotely even looked like her worked an early shift that day. Also, I described to her how she looked, that she had her hair down with a headband on, wearing a tube top and sage cargo pants. She said she doesn't even own cargo pants. What the heck? Just for some additional clarification, these two incidents happened a couple of weeks apart and with two different co-workers. What do you think that she saw? Last page swapped notebooks. So, my kid's got a math test coming up, and I gave him some extra exercises to practice. We're both at the desk, and I've got my laptop in the blue notebook. He's got the yellow notebook. We're chatting while he's working, and I even let him use my phone to get some help from an AI app with geometry. Out of the blue, my mother-in-law shows up, and we both go out to say hi. And about 10 minutes later, we're back at the desk. I'm on my computer, and my kid's trying to figure out where he left off in his work. I decide to write something down in my blue notebook. I flip it open to the last page, and what the heck? There's math stuff in my kid's handwriting, and I raise an eyebrow. I look over at him and I say, "Hey, isn't this your math?" He keeps looking through his notebook like he's trying to find the last page that he was on. He takes my blue notebook and starts saying, "What? How? What?" We both look at each other, realizing what just happened. There's no way that he could have written in the blue notebook, and we checked the yellow one. The first page is definitely his handwriting, and there's no doubt that he started in the yellow notebook, and he never used any other notebook. How did the pages swap like that? Glitch with a light switch. Last night, I'd been working on my laptop when I decided to finally turn into bed. I switched off the one light, which had been on in my room over my desk, and I got into bed. But I got caught in the usual loop of doom scrolling. So there I was, scrolling in the dark, sitting on my bed, alternating between Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts. The ceiling fan and the air conditioner were both on, and yes, I do keep them on in this weather. Suddenly, while I was sitting in the dark, there was a power cut. I know this because the fan and the AC both went off at the same time. I was a bit miffed, of course, and decided to stay awake, doom scrolling just a little while longer. Since in this weather it wasn't difficult in any way to sleep without a fan or an AC. Sometime later, the power came back on, and so did the light. The fan and the AC came back on, which I understand that, but I was baffled by how the light came back on. I had very clearly switched it off before getting into bed, and I had been sitting in the darkness scrolling on my phone before the power went out. But along with the AC and the fan, the light came back on, as if it had never been switched off. I got up to check the switch, and it was indeed in the on position, almost as if I'd never switched it off. I should clarify, this is not a double pole switch, which I think that's the correct term, but I could be mistaken. Hence, it's not the kind of switch that could be on or off depending on how the other switch is positioned. It's not a case of the light being on because someone flipped the other pole switch somewhere else in the building. The light was really off, and the switch was really in the off position, and after the power cut, the light was back on, and the switch was in the on position. How did that happen? 3 random flashes, seemingly in thin air. Hi, this happened just now. I was sitting at my desk when, out from the window in front of me, I see a flash in broad daylight. I then changed my focus to the outside of my window to see it again, twice. I would say that this flash was about 10 meters away from my window, and seeing as I'm on the second floor, about a story and a half high, it's impossible for these flashes to be from some torch or other light source because not only was it extremely bright in the middle of the day, but it also had no origin point. This flash just appeared out of thin air. The best way that I can describe this is kind of like those floating, light-emitting particles from older video games. I considered the idea of light simply being reflected from some neighbor's garden decor or something like that, but if that were the case, then the light reflected from said decor would go directly into my eyes, prompting me to close them in response. The light that I saw just sat there, in the air. These flashes lasted over a second each. They didn't fade in or out, they were just on and then off. One user responds with, "Did you experience any headaches as well? Maybe you should consider checking out Aura and migraines." OP replies with, "This is a very plausible explanation, but no, I didn't have any headaches at the time. In fact, I was more relaxed than usual, and I don't have a history of severe migraines or seeing aura while having a headache." What do you think those flashes were? Glitch during a pub quiz. I don't even know how to classify this glitch or whatever it was. On our trip to the UK in 2011, my husband and my cousin and I got in a pub quiz in York. We weren't really interested at first, so we didn't take any answer sheets. But to pass the time, I went ahead and started writing down the answers on my own sheet of paper. I started with number 1, so we didn't miss any. Right around number 15, I believe, I heard the lady calling out the questions skip to 17. I can't remember the exact numbers, but I do know that she skipped at least 2. My husband was at the bar at the moment, and I looked to my cousin for confirmation that I had heard correctly. And yes, he agreed that she had skipped a couple of numbers. I expected some participant in the quiz to correct her or to ask her about it, but nobody said anything. The lady went on calling out questions. She continued in order to number 25. Then suddenly, she skipped to 29. Again, this anomaly was confirmed by my cousin and now also my husband, who was back at the table. And again, nobody corrected the lady or asked about the skipped numbers. I could only assume that 1, the quiz worked in some odd way that we just weren't familiar with, or 2, somebody would point out the mistake before the lady called out the answers, and maybe ask what those missing questions were. However, that never happened. The questions stopped at 30, and then the lady began calling out the answers. Now, I waited curiously for her to get to the numbers that she had skipped, and I was positive that when she called out those answers, somebody in the pub would protest and then say that she had never given those questions. Instead, when she did get to those numbers, which were 16 and I think 26 through 28, I remembered those questions being called out. By the end of the answers, I realized that every answer she called out had been a question that I had, in fact, heard her ask. What's more, my husband and cousin both remembered those questions too. The fact that I was literally keeping track on paper makes this even weirder. We couldn't figure it out. We never did figure it out. And incidentally, we were sipping on our first beer, so it's not like we were drunk or anything. There appeared to be no confusion in the pub whatsoever. Unfortunately, we didn't think to ask anyone else in the pub if they had observed the same thing that we did, but I wish so much that we had. I just experienced my most clear glitch in the Matrix, and Kiddo did too. It's so random and bizarre, and I can't wrap my head around it. My husband made pizza rolls for our kids. I got them out of the oven and onto plates, and each plate had 10 pizza rolls. I walked over to set my daughter's plate down, who's 6 years old, on the table. She's autistic, which is mostly only relevant because of her reaction to what happened. And she was excitedly jumping up and down by the table, and I happened to stumble and 2 pizza rolls fell off of the plate, falling towards her. So she reached out to try to catch them, and before our eyes, they just vanished right before she caught them. Totally gone. And not even in like a blink. I mean, both of our eyes were wide open, and these pizza rolls just disappeared like a magic trick. I thought, well, maybe they didn't actually fall off and we both just panicked and thought that they did. But there was only 8 pizza rolls left on the plate now, so clearly 2 are missing. We stared at each other for a moment and she said, What? I was speechless for a moment, and then I was like, okay, they couldn't have just disappeared. So we looked under the table, all over the room, and then finally I call my dogs in like, screw it. Even if they eat them, I just want them to be found. And nothing. I thought that they would 100% find them if they were there, but these dogs aren't even sniffing around like food had recently been on the floor at all. They're just gone. And so my daughter is so pissed. So much so that I made her a couple more. But what the F, man? I've never experienced something like that, at least not literally right in front of my eyes. And the fact that my daughter saw it too. She's literally still moving everything in the room around 20 minutes later because, well, how is that possible? She wants an explanation, but I've got nothing. I drove through a glitch in the Matrix, and my mom and daughter experienced this with me. About 4 months ago, my mom had knee replacement surgery, and they sent her home the next day. After 3 days, her leg was kind of red and significantly more swollen. She also had a fever, so we decided to go back to the hospital. This was around 10 p.m. and it was dark. I was driving, Mom was in the passenger seat, and my 12-year-old daughter was in the back middle seat. We live in a very rural area, and after about 10 miles, we hadn't met one single other vehicle. It's that rural. Along this stretch of highway, there are a few really tight curves that have a 30-mile-per-hour reduced speed limit sign. No flashing lights or anything else, just a yellow metal sign. There's a creek on one side and a steep cliff on the other, so no shoulder, no driveways, and nowhere for another car to be besides on the road, as we were. After the first curve, all of a sudden, we see a bright blue light flash through the car. I saw it on the trees in front of me and behind me when I looked in the door mirror. Then it was gone. Like cop lights, but without any red or headlights behind us. And just for 1 second. No sound, no other cars in front or behind us. And we were really only going 30 miles per hour, and all three of us saw this flash. The exact same thing. It really freaked me out because I'm a very logical and rational person, and I can say that this is the only experience that I've had in my whole life that I simply can't explain. Also, there are 2 wooden crosses beside the road where a tractor trailer crashed and 2 people died in that spot. I remember that accident because it tore up the highway where the semi jackknifed and that section had to be repaved. I don't believe in ghosts or aliens or anything like that, and if my mom and daughter hadn't seen this too, I would have convinced myself that I was just seeing things and probably never mentioned it to anyone ever again. So, my theory is we drove through a glitch in the Matrix and saw the emergency lights from that accident years ago. As crazy as that seems, it makes as much sense as anything else that I can think of. What do you guys think? Has this happened to you or anyone that you know? I buried the same fish twice. Yesterday, I removed the net over my pond to find that my only Mayan koi and calico goldfish were dead. Both had signs of injury to their bodies. My mother watched me dig a hole in the ground and put my Mayan koi in. On top of the koi, I put my larger calico goldfish and covered both with dirt. I added a pile of stones on top of the grave to make sure that my chickens didn't dig it up. And that night, I made sure to secure every inch of the net to ensure that no animals could get into the pond and kill any other fish. This morning, I took the net off of the pond and watched as the same Mayan koi that I had buried floated to the top of the pond. It had a bit of dirt caked on its body. My mother saw me pull the same fish out of the pond again. We checked the grave and it was completely undisturbed. I ended up digging up the grave and I found the same fish still buried underneath the calico goldfish. But this one was identical in every way to the fish that I had just pulled out of the pond, even down to the scratches on its flank. I know for a fact that I only had one Mayan koi. I distinctly remember considering buying 2 just in case one didn't make it, but I decided to only get 1 so that I would have the space in my pond to get another koi if I saw the perfect one. I have no idea how I could have had 2 completely identical koi with identical injuries in the exact same place. Reality didn't load correctly. I experience glitches quite frequently, but lately, they've just been getting ridiculous. A blue, beaten-down old Peugeot car was idling in front of my entrance when I came out of my building to wait for my friend to pick me up. He drives a tiny, blue, which is the exact same rare shade of blue, beater Peugeot, so this was obviously his car. I approached it and I see this really fat dude with a beard and glasses sitting in the driver's seat. He looked exactly like my friend, who matches that description. Maybe not as big as the dude in this car, but I don't know. I thought he might have put on a few pounds. Anyway, so I rip open the door, I get in, and amicably punch his fat like I do sometimes, and the dude just stares at me, and I stare back at him. As I mentioned, he has the same beard, same hair color, same age, same glasses. Everything was the same as my friend's, but I don't know, something was off. Why wasn't he saying anything? Why didn't that familiar feeling kick in? My brain just couldn't compute what the heck was going on for a hot minute, and we both just sat there and stared. And then I realized That's not my friend. I had just sat down in a complete stranger's car, punched him, and then stared at him. I said something like, "Oh," and then got out and walked away. I wonder what the dude thought was happening. It's almost like, the map didn't load right or something when I exited my building and went on to the street. My actual friend arrived a couple of minutes later. We have some back and forth in the comments about how eerie but also humorous this is, and somebody adds that they're just patiently waiting on the glitch subreddit for someone to post about how a stranger got into their car, punched them, stared at them, and then left without saying a word. Time froze. This happened around 2 years ago. I had just gotten off the bus and was waiting for my light to turn green. I had my headphones in and I was jamming out, and then the light finally did turn green. None of the cars were moving, so I assumed there was an ambulance. I took one of my headphones out to listen, but I didn't hear any sirens. So I look around, and not a single person or car is moving. And this lasted for about a full minute. Finally, I figured, screw it, I'm just gonna go. And as soon as my foot hit the pavement, everyone started moving again. The cars, the people. It was like time stopped, and I got this unsettling feeling in my stomach as if they were all waiting on me to make the first move. What made it even more unsettling was that everything was quiet. You know how people say when everything goes silent in a forest or the woods, you run? It usually means something predatory is there with you. And that's what this felt like. I still have no explanation for what happened that day. Chair fell up. One day, I was at Aldi's. I was standing in line, waiting to check out. In the lane to my left was a tall stack of chairs interlocked. There was maybe about 10 of them. The kind with hard plastic seats on metal frames, like school chairs, but they were adult-sized. They were all stacked like puzzle pieces. The stack wasn't leaning or tilted at all. The stack was about 5 feet to my left, and I was looking right at them when the top chair rose straight up about a foot and then cartwheeled over onto the ground loudly. Just the one chair. Now, I don't know if the other people in line were looking at the chairs when it happened, and they of course heard it and they reacted. I kept looking at their faces and mumbling, "Did anyone see that?" But no one seemed to hear me. I was the only one who looked shocked, because it seriously was shocking to me. That chair went up and then fell. It didn't fall over either, it did a whole cartwheel. It flipped completely upside down in the air before it fell, and it fell with way more force than it would have if it had just fallen over the side of the stack like normal. I don't know. I'll never understand how that happened. I know it's not that big of a deal, probably, but it didn't move within the laws of physics, and it really scared me. The legs went down over the chair, under it, the way it was stacked and held in place. It shouldn't have been able to move unless the whole stack was falling at the same time. If you had walked up to this stack of chairs and pulled on it in any direction, it would have pulled the chair under it, and so on, causing the entire stack to fall down. There was no way that one chair would fall off like that. Cheese glitch. This is such a mundane glitch, but I can't stop thinking about it. Yesterday morning, my 3-year-old daughter wanted cheese. I usually cut her a piece from a block of cheddar, and I remembered opening a new package of cheddar last week and giving her some. So, I went to grab it from the fridge. I always keep it in the same basket of cheeses in the fridge, so I knew exactly where it was. When I pulled it out, though, the package was sealed, completely unopened, like it was brand new. I thought I must be mistaken, so I spent some time checking the package to see if it was actually open anywhere, but it wasn't. It was definitely sealed. Confused, I went back to the fridge to look for the open package, but there wasn't another one. Finally, I decided to open the sealed package. I tore off the plastic strip that seals the bag, opened it, and the cheese inside was already cut and used, just like I remembered from last week. The edge of the block was cut, and there was even a loose chunk of cheese where my daughter hadn't finished the piece that I cut for her before. But this was all inside a sealed bag. I feel like I'm losing my mind. I wish that I'd taken a video when I opened it yesterday, but I had a very hangry toddler helping me, so I just quickly cut her some cheese while standing there, completely baffled. And just like that, he was standing there, alive. Disclaimer: I'm not even sure if this belongs on this subreddit or if this is just a misunderstanding, but I think this is kind of crazy. OP gives a summary in the form of a TLDR, but I don't think that's what you and I are here for. Let's read the whole thing. Here's a little background. My mom grew up in a small town and is still extremely close with many of her childhood friends, one of whose name is Liz. Changed her name for anonymity's sake. My family lives in the capital city, and the town that she grew up in is about a 4 to 5 hour drive away. But my parents visit there multiple times a year, so keeping contact is easy. Liz was married to a man named John. Again, name changed for anonymity's sake. John was a big, tall man and one of my favorite uncles growing up. At some point, they moved from the small town about 40 minutes away into the countryside and set up their farm and had a child. About 5 to 6 years ago, John very suddenly passed away, leaving Liz and everybody else devastated. John died one morning while he was home alone doing his morning farm tasks when he had a stroke, whilst outside in the freezing, snowy cold. This was very early in the morning, and neither his wife nor daughter would be home for another 6 to 8 hours, so he laid there, outside, unconscious, until his wife finally returned home to find him dead. This next part, I remember very, very well. I was at home and was helping my mom make dinner when Liz called to tell her of her husband's passing, and when my mom hung up the phone, she burst into tears and broke the news to me and the rest of the family. We all took it pretty hard. I was 19 or maybe 20 years old at the time and didn't live at home, so admittedly the next few days were a bit of a blur as I was not home constantly. I didn't attend the funeral myself, and I'm not sure exactly why, but I will say, in itself, that is not strange for my family and how we usually do things. I mean, my siblings and I didn't even go to my real uncle's funeral last year. That, and it probably being a few-day affair, I wouldn't have been able to get enough time off of work to do so. I vaguely remember my parents making the trip, and for some reason, I remember my mom stressing over what she would wear to the funeral. Over the following years, I remember his death being brought up quite a few times, and Liz, either alone or with her daughter, coming to the capital to visit us and other friends. She usually stayed in our guest bedroom. Every time that I thought about John and his death and how devastated she and they must still be, as his death was 100% a matter of fact. Well, cut to last summer. I was living at home for a couple of months when my mom texts me, "Liz is on her way to town and they'll be staying with us. I won't be home for a couple of hours. Can you please prep the guest bedroom just in case I don't make it in time?" To which I responded, "Yeah, of course." And I proceeded to make the bed, and I assumed it was her and her daughter. I also put the extra mattress for her on the other side of the room, as we usually did. One single duvet for the bed, and one single duvet for the mattress, and 2 sets of guest towels on the dresser. Again, this is what we usually did for them when they came to stay. My mom comes home, and I go off to the store to get some things for the barbecue that my mother decided we were going to have. When I pull up our driveway, I see her car, so I walk through the door and I call out, "Liz, Tina." As I lay the bags down to take my shoes off, I hear, "Oh wow, apparently I don't deserve a hello," said in a joking voice. A voice familiar, but I still had no idea who it was, so I walked a little further in to see a man standing with his arms open for embrace in the kitchen. Tina rushed to hug me, and Liz was in the bathroom. I'm standing there very confused by this man and who he was, when it kind of hit me. That's John. Followed immediately by, no, of course, that's not John. This must be some relative or something that's come for a visit. So I hugged him and said something like, "Oh, of course you do. I just thought you would prefer the hug." And I hugged this familiar stranger, planning to sneakily ask my mom to remind me who he was. Liz came out of the bathroom, gave me a hug, and walked right past the man and sat down next to my mom at the kitchen table. I motioned for my mom to help me with the alcohol that I had left in the car, when outside I whispered to her, "Who's that man in the kitchen again?" To which she looked at me like I was a crazy person and said, "What do you mean? That's John. He just lost a little bit of weight." And I realized that my initial thought was correct, and that was in fact a slightly skinnier John. I was at a loss for words, and my mom just stared at me in my surely pale, look like I've just seen a ghost face, and asked if everything was all right, and all I could say was, "Mom, John is dead." She laughed and asked, "What the hell are you talking about? Of course he's not dead. What do you mean?" I explained everything and how I swear that we have talked about his death multiple times since it happened, how it happened, and the phone call from Liz when we were making dinner, and even that she had said "they" in the text. I assumed it was just Liz and Tina, and therefore made the guest bedroom ready for 2 people instead of 3. My mom looked extremely confused, but told me what really happened. He did have a stroke, and he was lying unconscious outside, and neither Liz nor Tina would have been home for hours if Liz had not forgot something at the house, and they had to drive back to get it, arriving just minutes after John had fallen unconscious. She was able to call the emergency services and get John into the car. Remember, he was a big man and must have taken incredible strength, and drive towards the ambulance. This ultimately saved John's life. He wouldn't have survived if she had not forgotten her wallet and had to drive back. He has apparently come over many times with Liz and Tina and stayed at our house multiple times over the last few years. Me and my mom brushed this off as a huge misunderstanding, which maybe it probably is, but I still feel weird with the whole situation, as the fact that he died and the sorrow following his death still feels so real and true. What do you guys think? A glitch? An alternate reality? Me being crazy? Or just a misunderstanding? This is driving me crazy today. I got to work this morning and was putting my lunch in the fridge when my headphone fell out. I never heard it hit the ground, I checked my hair and it wasn't there. I checked under the fridge, under the equipment near the fridge, and I couldn't find it. I spent a good 15 minutes looking for it, and I pretty much accepted that it was gone. Finally, I decided to blast the loudest song that I have to see if I could hear it. I hear noise coming from the front of the office, and it's sitting perfectly on top of the trash can at the front of the office, which is at least 40 feet from where I was standing when it fell out of my ear, and it's blowing my mind. The trash can is in a tiny alcove just big enough to throw paper trash in under the register, and I was the only person there, so there's no chance that someone was messing with me. This person includes an edit that says, "Since everyone is asking, I'll clarify here. I was only wearing one earbud because the other one doesn't work and it stays in the case, and I paused my book as soon as I felt it fall out so that I wouldn't miss anything. I was the only person there, and I consistently looked for the earbud until I found it. No one else wears the same headphones as me, and no customers have access to the trash. It is definitely my headphone, and no one was there to find it or to mess with me. This isn't an office building. I work for the post office. It's one big room with carrier cases and a retail counter. There are several obstacles, like cases, partitions, to block the customers from viewing my boss's desk. You get it. And it is not a straight shot to the trash can. My door locked itself. I live with my parents and have a lot of days with the house to myself because our schedules are so different. Well, I've been home alone all day, and it's 7:30 with no sign of anyone. I go outside to smoke in my car, and it's not uncommon for me to accidentally lock the door handle on my way out due to muscle memory, but I always bring my keys with me. Well, about 30 minutes go by, and I get up to go back inside when I realize the door is locked. So I go to unlock it, and again, it's normal for me to accidentally lock myself out, but the deadbolt, the second lock, which can only be used from the inside, was also locked. There's no possible way to lock the deadbolt on your way out without going out of your way to use the key. Someone has to be inside in order to use it, but no one came home while I was outside, and the back door was also locked. So, needless to say, I'm spooked right now. I'm currently typing this with a baseball bat in my lap and every light in the house turned on. The only comforting thing is that my cats are acting perfectly normal, especially since one of them is extremely skittish and hides from strangers. So, if anyone has any theories on what that was about, please enlighten me. It would do wonders to calm down my overly active imagination. A plane just disappeared out of nowhere. I was walking my dog and was looking up at the sky, watching a plane come in. It was flying right towards me, but wasn't exactly over me quite yet. It seemed like it would be over me in about 20 to 30 seconds. Anyway, my dog needed to go to the bathroom, so I looked over at her for a second to see if she started going to the bathroom yet. She did, all good there. Right after I saw her going, I looked back up at the sky in the direction of the plane, and it was just gone. Disappeared out of thin air. I only looked at my dog for maybe 2 seconds. I then looked in every direction trying to find the plane, and I just couldn't find it. It should have still been flying right at me, but even when I looked in the direction that it would have been going after, there was still nothing there. It was surely a commercial airliner flying at me. I could make out the shape and everything. It also had all of the lights on, so I know it wasn't some other kind of UFO or UAP or anything like that. There was even another airliner flying in directly behind it, like jets do when they're preparing to land, where they're each like minutes behind each other or something like that. And that jet was still there when I was looking back up. I live in Las Vegas, but I'm about 15 miles from the airport. What do you think that was? The kitchen matrix. So, this is a random thing that occasionally happens in our kitchen and our kitchen only. I have ADHD and OCD, and I'm very particular when it comes to the kitchen and how it's organized. When we bought our house, we agreed that I would dictate what happened in the kitchen and he could do whatever he wanted in the backyard, and the rest of the house had a mutual agreement clause. Anyway, I cook a lot. It's literally one of the few hyperfixation hobbies that I started that ever really stuck. There's a few other in rotation, but I digress. I have this weird thing with brands and I only buy OXO equipment. That being said, I have a variety of whisks and other utensils. I have a mini whisk that I love and use for so many small dishes, eggs, broths, coffee. Weird, I know. Again, it's just a ADHD/OCD thing. My husband cooks breakfast for himself often, as I'm often out of the house by the time he rises. I'll wash the dishes and put them away if time permits. It's another fun OCD tick. We both use this tiny whisk daily for multiple things, and we are very sure that we put it back when we're done. We had a few busy weeks, and we're out on weekends going to brunch, soccer games, basketball games, various events, mostly kid-centric. You get it. The weekends slowed down, and we went back to a more house-central timeline. So, Saturday morning, we get up and start prepping for breakfast, and I cannot for the life of me find the damn whisk. Weeks go by. I deep clean and reorganize the kitchen, trying in vain to find the whisk, but no luck. This has happened with a few other things, but nothing as pressing as this stupid mini whisk that we use every single day. Large ice cube, gone. One single small spoon out of a set of 24, gone. It's fine. But this is different. Anyway, I conceded to the loss of the stupid little whisk and braved Target to buy a new one. I got the new one home, washed it, and I put it away in the drawer. Hours later, I'm in the kitchen having a casual conversation with my husband while we prep dinner. I go to the drawer with the whisks, and lo and behold, there are two identical OXO whisks. One, obviously newer, and one with a bit of wear and discoloration on it. Now, cue both of us staring in shock at one another. What the frosted flakes? How in the hell? This drawer has 6 whisks and 3 sets of tongs. There's no way that the dang thing could have been looked over. The drawer swallowed it, hung on to it, and then spit it back out when we moved on and bought a new one. We're still missing the ice cube tray that we lost. We still only have 23 out of the 24 spoons that we bought in a set. I don't know. I can only explain this as a weird glitch in the matrix, or maybe a wormhole? I'm baffled, and so is my husband. Anyway, thanks for reading my glitch story. It feels good to get it out of my mind. Oh yeah, and the old whisk broke at the handle about a week after it came back. I'll never know, and it's going to drive me crazy. I guess that thought will be a new hyperfixation that joins the rotation. Driving doppelganger. Something strange happened to me yesterday. I was on my way to a forest parking lot to go for a walk with my kids. My brother-in-law was planning to meet us there with his children. On the way, I saw him driving towards me and turning left, heading in the direction of the forest parking lot. I was about 100 meters away, and I noticed that he was driving his wife's car, which he occasionally uses when she's away for work. But one thing struck me as odd. He didn't look at me. Not even a glance in my direction. This was strange because I drive a very, let's call it a distinctive car. He should have recognized me. I could clearly see his face focused straight ahead. I turned onto the same street that he had taken and saw him in front of me for a short while before he sped up, and then I eventually lost sight of him. When I arrived at the parking lot, I was surprised that he wasn't there yet. About 2 minutes later, he pulled into the parking lot, but in his own car. He got out and was confused by the puzzled look on my face. I told him that I had just seen him in his wife's car less than 5 minutes ago, but he insisted that it wasn't him, and that his wife's car was parked in their garage. Obviously, I must have seen just a similar car, and my brain, filled in the blanks. It couldn't have been him, but I was so sure that I recognized him. I didn't even bother to check the license plate because I was so convinced that it was him. This experience has left me questioning whether we can ever truly trust eyewitness accounts. It's changed the way that I think about testimony forever. The Phantom Moon. To start with, I'd like to share one of my own experiences with the uncanny. Despite being a somewhat skeptical resident of the simulation, I know that I can't explain everything. And this was the most unexplainable occurrence that I've ever witnessed with my own 2 eyes. It was the summer of 2016, one weekend in August. It was the peak of the Perseid meteor shower, and, as was tradition for my dad and I, we decided to drive out to a hill in the Chilterns. We wanted to escape the hellish glow of our light-polluted town to get the best view that we could. It was a perfect stargazing spot that we'd visited several times before. My dad is an avid stargazer, and we'd brought his telescope there before to see Saturn and Jupiter. But this was the first time that we'd gone specifically to watch the meteor shower. Previously, we'd only viewed it from our garden. The garden wasn't a bad spot. It was surrounded by trees that blocked out much of the streetlight glow. But still, we were sure that out in the middle of the countryside, we'd see a truly spectacular display. This time, we were joined by my partner and my cousin, neither of whom had been to this hill before. The night wasn't shaping up to be as great as we'd hoped. The sky was clouding over rapidly as we drove to the hill, but my dad, ever the optimist, reminded me of the 1999 solar eclipse that we'd watched from a beach in Cornwall when I was about 8 years old. The sky had been just as overcast and miserable on that day, and I remembered him cursing the heavens for ruining our view. But as the eclipse neared, a hole miraculously opened in the clouds, revealing the sun glaring through. Now that was a pretty spooky experience, but nothing that couldn't be chalked up to coincidence. However, what was to come that evening still sends chills down my spine when I think about it. We arrived at the hill, we parked the car, and began the trek to the summit. It wasn't a long climb, but the hill was steep enough to give all 4 of us a mild workout. Once at the top, we laid out a couple of blankets and settled in, hopeful for the show to begin. As the sky darkened, though, it became clear that the weather wasn't going to cooperate. We were disappointed, and even my dad's optimism started to wane. My partner and cousin suggested that we wait a little bit longer to see what happened, so we stayed, watching the clouds roll across the horizon. Soon, a clearing began to form. It was now sunset, and the last rays of daylight illuminated the underside of the clouds. The view was stunning, almost enough to make the trip worthwhile on its own. The sky looked as though it was on fire, even though overhead the clouds were as thick as ever. As the sun vanished, we noticed the moon rising on the opposite horizon, a bright silver orb dotted with craters. It appeared much larger than usual. I stared at it for a moment and then tapped my dad on the shoulder to point it out. "I don't think the moon is supposed to be full tonight," I said. I checked the moon phase earlier to see if it would interfere with our view of the meteor shower, and it was only supposed to be a half moon. My dad shook his head, confused. No, it definitely wasn't supposed to be full." But there it was, clear as day, this enormous, super large full moon rising over the hills in the distance. I grabbed my partner and my cousin's attention, and they saw it too. All four of us stood there, watching this impossibly large moon make its way toward the cloud cover overhead. There was no mistaking it. Then, things took an even stranger turn. My dad called out to me and told me to look straight up. Overhead, a hole had begun to open in the clouds, just like during that eclipse from all those years ago. And there, as expected, was the half moon, the real moon. We all shared confused glances, looking from the moon above over to the one on the horizon. The second moon was still hanging there. As we stood in silence, mouths agape, we watched the full moon on the horizon begin to fade. It shifted from white to orange and then disappeared entirely. The real moon above soon vanished too behind the clouds again, leaving us sitting in this uneasy silence. We tried to rationalize what we had seen. A giant spotlight, maybe? But we couldn't think of anything bright or large enough to mistake for the full moon. The object had appeared in the clear part of the sky, not projected onto the clouds as one of us suggested. Eventually, we packed up and we headed home, giving up on the meteors and carrying with us a quiet unease about what we had just witnessed. I spent the next few days researching aerial phenomena, trying to find anything that could explain what had happened. But to this day, I found nothing to account for the strange vision that we all shared. To add to the strangeness, in the years since, my dad and I have occasionally reminded each other of that night. We both remember it vividly and share a sense of discomfort as though we'd seen something that we weren't supposed to. But oddly, my partner and my cousin have no memory of the second moon. They do recall the trip to the hill, but nothing about this phantom moon. If I had been the only one to see it, I guess I might have written it off as a hallucination, and that would have been fine by me, but the fact that my dad remembers it too makes it even more unnerving. I don't think I'll ever forget the night that I saw the phantom moon. Physical mirroring. I'm not sure what to call this. I have an 11-year-old son, and very often, not always, but in many instances, a minor physical injury or ailment will manifest in both of us at the same time. For example, on Thursday, he was at an evening event and fell hard while chasing a hayride. I was at home and tripped and fell into the coffee table. When I picked him up a bit later, he was eager to show me his bruise and swollen left knee and scraped right elbow. I had those same bruises and scrapes in the same places on me. And this happens with us all the time. A couple of weeks ago, I burned my thumb on a hot glue gun, resulting in a blister. A few days later, he showed me a blister on his own thumb. Pulled muscles, bug bites, canker sores, stubbed toes. I mean, they're all minor, random incidents with visible, identical manifestations, or at least comparable evidence, have been consistent for as long as I can remember. It would make sense if the event causing the mark happened in each other's presence. Maybe one of us subconsciously just imitated the other. Or it would also make sense if it was environmental, like allergies or a sunburn, or something contagious like a cold or even a fever, or a hereditary symptom. Other than clumsiness, I guess. But these examples don't fall into a pattern like that. Does anyone else have a similar, persistent experience like this? We have some interesting additions in the comments that I have to point out. One commenter replies, "There's a scar that 3 generations have in my family. We all have an identical scar on our left eyebrow, all caused by slipping and bashing our heads on something metal, leaving a cut so bad that it needed stitches." Somebody replies to that with, "This is so weird, but 3 generations of my family also have the same scar on their eyebrows too. Only thing is, my dad's is from an accident, and my brother and my sons were there when they were born. Left eyebrow for all 3. Well, I'm gonna join that eyebrow scar club. I've got one too that's probably identical to those 6 people there just in the comments. Mine was from an accident too, on a bicycle. Weird. Joker playing card. I bought a brand new deck of cards the other day, and I opened them to play with my partner and our 3-year-old. Like anyone would, I started by removing the jokers and the instruction cards. To my surprise, there was only one joker in color. I mentioned how strange that was, since you usually get one colored joker and one black and white joker. My partner agreed and joked that it might just be due to budget cuts. We decided to play Chase the Ace, or Old Maid, and used the single-colored joker as the ace, or the maid. We played about 3 or 4 games of this while sitting at the dinner table, but eventually our 3-year-old just wanted to play with the cards on his own. When he was done, I counted the cards to make sure they were all there, 52 plus the joker, and put them away. The next evening, I picked up the cards to play again, and now there were 2 jokers in the deck. Both were colored, still missing the black and white joker. I was shocked. We had paired up the cards, leaving the single joker behind multiple times. I even asked my partner if he remembered our conversation about it, and he did. So, what happened? Did the joker replicate itself? A rental car and the 11th nail. I've experienced glitches and eerie situations a few times in my life. This was the most recent and by far the most blatantly obvious. 3 months ago, my husband and I were on a week-long vacation in San Diego. We rented an SUV for the trip. The trip was fabulous, everything that we needed after grinding away at our 9-to-5s and daily monotony. Well, we went to get lunch in the Hillcrest district and saw a thrift shop and decided to park and check it out. We bought a couple of shirts and came back to the SUV. I opened the door to climb into the passenger seat when I see it. My fingernail is sitting right there on the plastic thing that you step on to get in and out of the vehicle. Just perfectly sitting there exactly where you step to hop in and out. I check my fingernails and they're all intact. I pick up the fingernail and it's my nail, all right. It's shaped like my index finger, fits my index finger, even down to the very wear and tear. And when I say wear and tear, I mean I get the square tips, and the tips end up rounding out a bit on the sides. And the kicker? no additional fingernails would or even could be there. I mean, that wasn't even our vehicle, and I did them in my home state. A second thing is that anything on that plastic step part of the car couldn't have been there long, since I was just getting in and out of the vehicle all week. It was so weird. I showed my husband and he was tripped out too, saying that, yeah, that's definitely my fingernail. I even saved it. Gross. Here's a video. Chicken Houdini. I keep chickens. One night, when I went to put them away, I couldn't find one of them. And she was my favorite, so I was really upset. I didn't want her to get killed by a predator overnight, but no matter how hard I looked, I just couldn't find her anywhere. The next morning, I opened the run to let the chickens out. I went to grab something, and when I came back to start looking for the missing chicken again, there she was, just clucking along with the rest of the group. That night, I went to put them away again, and once more, she was missing. I looked around a bit and thought maybe she was getting broody and had a secret spot somewhere. Since she'd been fine the night before, I wasn't worried anymore. The next morning, I let the chickens out and I paid extra attention, hoping to spot her coming out of hiding. But she came out of the run with the rest of the chickens. Now, I started thinking, maybe she's already in the run when I'm putting them away at night, and maybe I just don't notice her. Well, the third night now, she's missing again. So I checked in every nook and cranny in their run, but she wasn't there. Fast forward to the next morning, like clockwork, she comes out of the run with all the others. Again, that night, she's gone. I looked everywhere, even around the perimeter of the run, wondering if she was just somehow squeezing herself in during the night. But the run is solid. There's no way in or out. And still, the next morning, there she was, ready to be let out with the rest of them. This happened about 3 months ago, and it hasn't happened ever since. Now, she goes in with the rest of the group like normal every night. We have someone in the comments suggesting that the OP install a coop cam and live stream for some evidence. Cats in the house. This is a daily routine. My guy goes to work in the mornings, and I'm up a couple minutes after he jumps in the shower. I pack his lunch and I make him a hot breakfast, and he sits at the table and I'll braid his hair before I walk him out. Now, I mention all of this because while all this is going on for what is usually 30 to 45 minutes, I'm getting meowed at by my cat. I let the cat and the dog out when I walk my boyfriend to his car. And if you know some cats, nothing is ever really fast enough for their patience, so he was telling me about it the whole time. Again, this is something that we do regularly. He wants to go out right then, and I say he could wait until we all go out, just like every other day. Well, he was there, and legit the first to exit the house, per usual. Now, we walk out, and said cat runs off. He went towards the left, and we went to the right. Just for some visual context, he's a black cat, and basically a shadow with eyes. It's early morning hours, and it's still dark. When we come back in, it's usually just the dog and I. I don't remember seeing the cat come in. He couldn't have gotten in before because the door was closed. I'm almost certain that he was in the shadows of a tree or something. I take a moment to go to the restroom. Now, I can't say if anyone opened the door in between for certain, but from where I was, it would be very unlikely, and I would have heard the door open. After I decide to let the dog back out, I take a moment to sit on the outside swing, and after about a minute, I hear a meow from inside the house. It can't be, right? because I let him out already. Well, I wait, and I hear another meow. I open my front door to investigate, and there's the cat, somehow back in the house, just begging to be let out again. Door closing by itself in friend's house. So, this happened about 10 years ago when I was still in high school and wanted to know your guys' thoughts because this experience is still something I can't explain. I want to preface this story by saying that I'm not a believer in the paranormal, which is what makes this experience so confusing. So I would like to have some kind of logical explanation. When I was 17, my friend was living with another friend at his grandmother's house. He grew up in a rough home with an abusive and neglectful mother, so he experienced very unstable housing. He had been telling me about some unsettling experiences that he had while at the house. One was a display case of porcelain dolls that his grandmother had, and all of their heads would move by themselves. Another was hearing the sound of a music box playing during the night, but never a music box in the house. I was pretty skeptical of his claims because both were abusing drugs at the time. Both were taking high doses of cough syrup and getting high, probably abusing other substances as well. So, from this, I didn't really believe what they were telling me. But then, I had a chance to go over to the house. I went over there, and the back door was opening and closing by itself. Mind you, this is in the middle of summer in Georgia, and there wasn't a gust of wind that could move the door. Also, there weren't any air vents above or below the door, but the air from the vents probably wouldn't have been strong enough to move the door anyway. Also, no string pulleys or anything of that sort, just in case someone thinks it was a prank or something. It was opening and closing as if a person was doing it, but no one was. As unexplainable as this event was, it still wasn't enough to turn me into some type of believer in the paranormal. I would be jumping to conclusions, I think, if I were to immediately ascribe an explanation to something that's unexplainable. What are your guys' thoughts, and what do you think it might have been that was causing the door to do that on its own? Shadow Cat. I'll start this off by saying I live in a house with an upstairs, and that is where our bedrooms are located. I also have 3 cats. One is gray, one is orange, and one is a brown/black tabby. They wake me up sometime between 3 and 5 a.m. every morning for food. And sadly, I am their slave, and I've always gotten up to feed them. This particular night, I wasn't sleeping the best, tossing and turning for most of the night. My orange cat woke me up for food at 3:30 a.m. or so. I get all the way downstairs, and keep in mind, I don't turn on any lights when I do this. We have a lot of light coming through in the windows, so it's not completely black. Plus, I've lived there for over 5 years, and I know the layout by heart. All my cats are lined up in front of their dishes, and they're waiting for me to scoop their food. I usually give them a pet as well. On this particular night, which was a Thursday, after feeding them, I had the urge to pet the brown and black tabby, but something in my gut just told me not to. I put the food away, and then I head back upstairs. Halfway up, I sense something at the top of the stairs. I look up there, and it was our brown and black tabby. He was leaving my son's room and coming down to eat with the rest of the cats. And for the rest of the night, I couldn't sleep or even leave my bed until the sun came up. I don't know how he could have been downstairs waiting at his bowl, and then also upstairs at the same time when I was going back up. Now this freaked me out, and my fiance thought that I was just seeing things because I was tired. But I would love any kind of rational explanation that anyone may have to offer. Lost pillowcase pops up on a different pillow. This is my first quote-unquote real glitch, and if someone has an explanation, I'd love to hear it. For the purpose of this story, we'll name the 4 pillowcases. Oh my god. We're gonna name the 4 pillowcases on my bed. 2 of them are fluffy pillows, which are new and markedly more fluffy than the other 2 pillows. Thought we were gonna name the pillowcases. I have one memory foam pillow, which always has a white pillowcase, and one sad pillow, which has lost all of its fluff. This also goes with a huge white willow case. Nah, I'm not reading this one. A duplication. I thought that I should come here and share what I experienced today, and honestly, it really freaked me out. If you golf, then you'll know what I mean by a rangefinder, specifically the Approach G6 by Garmin. Today, I was packing away after school a good round at my home course, and I go to grab my shoes, which I keep in like this little dip in the boot. When I grab them, I see a second rangefinder. And for me and my granddad, who I typically golf with, these are not cheap. They're roughly 40 to 60 pounds a pop. And I know that we only have one and we share it. Me, thinking that my granddad got me a second-hand one and forgot to tell me, I started to thank him when he turned to me and told me that he definitely did not. So I think maybe it's the one in my golf bag. But nope, I still have that one hanging on the side where I always put it. So, just out of curiosity, I turn it on, and when it's on, the screen is flashing and it's failing to gain GPS. I don't know, something about it is off. There's these weird amounts of damage, yet only a few scratches on the screen, and it was fully charged as if it was charged recently. I asked my granddad and the lad that I was playing with if they know anyone who used the same rangefinder as we did, but no, they said they don't. So I checked the history of the courses played, and I've heard of very few. I click on one of them, and again, something is just not right. It says that it had been switched on and being used for the same course for 23 hours and some change. And the batteries don't normally last that long, and they were all like this. Now, this rangefinder also allows you to enter clubs and the distances that you hit them for extra support, and there was only one club when I checked, and it was just some random letters in all caps. I don't know, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something like OLHSMALHTOXO. If I remember to, I'll edit and add more when I have access to this glitched rangefinder. I lost some time, but not. This happened to me just this last week, on Thursday, and I'm still scratching my head trying to figure it out. This year, I'm participating in NaNoWriMo to finish a book that I started 2 years ago. And just for those that don't know, NaNoWriMo is short for National Novel Writing Month. I had roughly 40,000 words left to finish to make it a full-length novel, which is about 80,000 words, and I thought that Nano lined up right with my goals and my timelines. Every day for the month of November, I've gotten into a routine. Every day, I take my kids to school, I come home, I make myself a cup of hot chocolate, I turn on this very specific thunderstorm video on YouTube, and then I sit and read the last chapter that I wrote, and then I write the following chapter. Well, on Thursday, I had a doctor's appointment after dropping off the kids, so I was a little later in my routine than usual. I was home by 9:30, and by 10, I was turning on that thunderstorm video. The video is like a 4-hour-long video with no ads and no interruptions. Now, usually when I start it, I have to watch an ad before it loads, but there's no mid-roll ads. I always start the video at the beginning, and there's a logo / some text that pops up in the bottom left-hand corner when the video starts. So this time, there was an ad before it loaded. I started it at the beginning, and it played another ad before loading the beginning. But I saw the logo. So I sat down in my chair to read the first chapter and then write. It was a hard chapter to write. Felt like it took forever. About 12:45 p.m., I was finalizing that chapter. I looked at my phone because I have an alarm set for 1 p.m. for a lunch break and thought that I was going to be finished just in time. Suddenly, there was an ad in my video. There's not supposed to be. So I went over to the computer and my video had ended. It played an ad and then it went to the next video in my liked playlist. The whole 4-hour video ended in just 2 hours and 45 minutes. I'm so puzzled because I remember seeing the logo at the beginning like always, so I know I started the video from the beginning. But I also know that I was only writing from 10 a.m. to 12:45 p.m. So I feel like I'm missing time, but I know and can account for what I was doing. I don't know, I'm just so confused. I feel like something somewhere in there glitched. Car glitched to a different parking lot. My glitch happened in a parking lot. So one night, I went into town to go to a movie watching event at a new cat cafe. I had to park kind of far away, but the parking lot was free. I parked and walked to the cafe. I took the same way back to the parking lot, but when I got there, my car was gone. The fob was out of battery, so I couldn't use that to find it. I walked through the entire parking lot at least 5 times, checking every single parking space carefully, but nothing. I called my dad and he picked me up. We called the police to report a stolen car, and the next day they said that they found the car. We went back to the parking lot and it still wasn't there. Then we went down the street, and that's where we found it, in a completely different parking lot. Not only that, but it was facing in a different direction from the direction that I parked it in the other lot. I remember that I parked it in front of a bush, but now it was parked in front of a tree. I don't know why or how that we found the car somewhere else. Supposedly it hadn't been stolen, but how did it move to a different parking lot altogether? I mean, the parking lots don't even look similar. They've got a very different layout in each of them, and no one will take me seriously. But to me, this definitely seems like some sort of glitch in the Matrix. Someone in the comments suggests that maybe the car was stolen and then dumped in a nearby parking lot. OP responds with, well, possibly, but there were no signs of any kind of break-in or hot wiring, and there were no items left or stolen from inside the car. What do you think that was? My student ID / keycard no-clipped into my dorm. My fiance and I went on a short nature walk this afternoon, and I know that my card was in the ID slot of the small crossbody that I was carrying. I know this because I took the trash out from my room before we left, and I had to use the card to return into the building where we grabbed the water bottles from and set out for our location. I didn't open the bag between coming in from taking the trash and us being on the trail. And I only opened it twice while I was on the trail too. I remember it being in the slot and adjusting it in the pocket, at least the first time I opened the bag. When we finished up, we got some Jimmy's John's sandwiches and headed back, and I opened my bag to let us into the building, and that's when I found that my ID was gone. We went back to the trail and retraced our steps, and nothing. We give up, and then we had one of my roommates let us in, and I promptly found it sitting on the shelf above my desk. Now, there's no way that I left it out of my bag, or I wouldn't have been able to get back in before we left. And it was in my bag while we were on the trail. I remember seeing it. I don't know, I feel like I'm going insane here. What is wrong with my radiator? Okay, so a little backstory here. My cousin and my sister both bought me a necklace for my birthday one day with a clear quartz crystal and another with like a metal weed leaf. And one day, they both just went missing. I usually kept them hanging up on this traffic cone that I stole ages ago, but now they were nowhere to be found at all. I honestly looked everywhere for them, and I moved all of my furniture and even looked underneath everything too. I especially looked under my radiator as I thought that they could have fallen down there, but I used a torch and I checked to make sure that they hadn't. I started asking my family if they had taken them, but they all swore that they hadn't. Months later, I fell asleep with my Xbox controller in my hand, and when I woke up, that controller was just gone. Vanished. Completely disappeared. Now, I thought that I would find it eventually, as me and my sister had planned on moving rooms. Before we could do that, we decided to deep clean each room, and we moved all the furniture in my room. We cleared the closet that had a bunch of junk in it, and not a single inch of that room was not cleaned or searched. No necklaces, no controller. A few days later, after painting, we started moving our furniture back in. I moved my bed, and underneath my radiator, there lays my Xbox controller and both of my necklaces wrapped around each other, making a ring around my controller. I swear, on my life, bro, me and my sister both agreed that her and I had both checked numerous times in that spot, and I know as well that my family wouldn't have taken either because I was constantly complaining as it was my only Xbox controller, and I had nothing else to do otherwise. Honestly, I have no idea how they got there, and I'm sure that I don't sleepwalk because I genuinely sleep like a log, and I've had people sleep over tell me that I barely even move when I sleep. What is going on? Double glitch. I'm naturally skeptical, and I am not seriously suggesting that this is a glitch or proof that we live in a simulation, but it is something that weirded me out and I felt apt to share with you. I was working behind a checkout counter, and as I went to scan the items, the total was already on my screen. And as I scanned the items one by one, the total remained unchanged. And I should add that it was correct after I scanned all of the items. Now, I know this is a technological glitch and potentially against the rules of the sub, but a computer glitching doesn't normally result in a future prediction, if extremely minor. After the customer left, I turned around and I told my colleague what happened. They then said that they'd been experiencing deja vu during their whole shift, and that it's not something that they normally ever get. It's a weird glitch that I could arguably have imagined, but the apparent deja vu and relative parallel? Well, I don't know about that. Teleporting fish. So, me and my friend go swimming on the weekend, and we have this toy fish that we always take with us and mess around with it, either by throwing it to pick it up by the pool floor, or to play football with it underwater. We go to the pool at the gym where there's also this hot tub. My friend told me to drop the fish in the hot tub when we were in it, but then we couldn't find the fish anywhere afterward. We were super confused as to where it could have gone, since there weren't any holes big enough for the fish to have gone through in the hot tub, but we concluded despite this, it must have got sucked up into one of the jets or something. We were pretty disappointed to have lost our fish, but figured we would never see it again. However, once we got back in his car for him to take me home after our swim, I noticed that somehow the fish was back in the little storage slot on his dashboard that we normally kept it. I was like, dude, what the F is the fish? I found the fish, man. I thought he was messing with me, and maybe he had grabbed the fish from the hot tub and pretended that it was missing. Now, he also thought that I was messing with him too, but once we confirmed that neither of us was playing a trick on the other, we both felt pretty freaked out and spent the whole drive being like, how did that fish even get in there? It makes no sense. We have someone that leaves a comment on this story that says, I'm having a hilarious Toy Story-esque visions of this little fish, determined not to be left behind by his friends and getting into some mad adventures on the way back to the car. I'd watch that movie. Door glitch / replay. I'm hearing people who aren't there come home into my house. I'm not sure how to classify this, but it's definitely one of the weirdest sets of experiences I've had, largely because my family experiences it as well. The first time it happened, or at least the first time that we noticed it happening, was about a year ago. My boyfriend and I were home alone. My family was supposed to be out for the next few hours, so we were just beginning some intimate activities when we heard them return. The door opening, which is loud as always, and the muffled voices of my mom and my brother. We leapt up and scrambled to throw our clothes on, super confused as to why they were home 4 hours early. A few minutes later, we headed downstairs. It was quiet. The noises had stopped, but I wasn't exactly sure when, and I realized that no one had returned. It was just silence. My partner and I were both properly freaked out, and we had both very clearly heard them come home, heard them talking, and we heard the door open and shut. I told my mom about this the next day. About a month later, I was out for a walk. When I came back, my mom was a bit freaked out. She asked if I had come back and knocked at some point. I didn't. Apparently, she had heard heavy banging on the door, loud enough that she was able to hear it from upstairs, and came down to let me in, only for no one to be there. Now keep in mind, we have a Ring doorbell, and anyone that's at the door, or any loud noises, would have been picked up by the camera, which they were not. There were also multiple instances of us hearing knocking, to varying degrees of intensity, only for no one to be there. Those would be easier to write off as maybe, I don't know, some potential paranoia, maybe? But in many cases, my dog reacted as well and started barking, which he never does, except when someone's at the door. The latest notable incident was about a week ago. I was home alone doing schoolwork when I heard the doorknob shaking like it was being unlocked. Our door's been partially broken for the last few years, and it needs a lot of force to open. I thought, oh, Mom's home early. but the shaking didn't stop. I snuck over to the door and I looked through the peephole. No one was there, but I could still hear the doorknob shaking. It was strong and clear enough that someone had to be there. I worried that someone might be trying to break in despite the Ring doorbell's presence, maybe crouching out of sight of the peephole. I grabbed my phone, keypad ready to dial 911 if needed, and I crept to the window in a side room where the front door was visible. I didn't see anyone, and a few seconds later, it stopped. Now, my family and I, we know our house. We've been here for the last 16 years. My mother is a single mom who only just returned to work this year, and I've been in online school the last few years and stay almost entirely at home due to my medical issues. We know our house and we know how it sounds. Everyone that I tell these stories to frustratingly tells me that it was just the wind or the house settling, but it's not. It just isn't. It's very clearly the sound of a person, or maybe even people. We know how our house sounds, and this isn't that. It doesn't feel malicious or, upsetting necessarily, even though it freaks us out. I don't think it's a ghost or something either. My mom certainly doesn't. But it's weird enough that even she acknowledges the strangeness. It feels more like a time replay, if that makes any sense. Certainly, Matrix glitchy in nature, but I'm not entirely sure. I'll try to get some video when it happens again, but it's hard to tell that it's not real until you open a door to no one or come downstairs to an empty house. I know this isn't the most, insane story, but it's creepy to me and my family. Thank you for reading. Missing food reappears. This happened to me 8-ish years ago, living in a resort town in the Pacific Northwest. I was working as a cook at a brewery where we had fish and chips on the menu, like all restaurants out here, and we offered a kids version as well, where we took the same piece of fish but cut it twice to make 3 pieces. Batter, fry, serve smaller portion. You get it. So, as it's a slower midday weekday during lunch, I'm the only one on the line with another cook who is working prep around the corner. This order comes in for this kid's fish and chips. I cut, batter, and drop the pieces into the fryer, and then I continue working on the rest of the order. I go back to check the fryer, and only 2 of the 3 pieces are floating in the oil. I get my little poker tool out as I assume the other piece dropped low enough to get lodged on the grate at the bottom, or maybe stuck underneath the heating elements. I poke all around and I find nothing whatsoever, and decide to just drop another piece to complete the order. As everything else was just about ready, I mentioned to my prep buddy that I'm missing a piece, and, we both just kinda shrug. I serve the order and I move on. About 10 minutes later, this single piece of small fish is floating in the fryer, all by itself. I haven't had any more orders, so it wasn't another drop, and it's light golden brown, like it had just been dropped in a minute ago. Not quite done, and definitely not the darker, more burnt shade that it should have been if it was the original piece that I dropped now 15 minutes ago. This wasn't new fryer oil day. I'd worked in kitchens for like 15 years, and I was very familiar with all of the equipment, and especially the fryers. That fish wouldn't have been inedible, but it would have been at least near burnt. It's like it disappeared for 10 minutes and then reappeared in exactly the state that it was when it left. Now, could my prep cook have snuck over, grabbed it, and then put it back in 10 minutes later to mess with me? Maybe. Weird prank though. And a small kitchen to navigate without me seeing them too. I did ask if they were trying to mess with me, and the reply was something along the lines of how stupid that would be. to which I agreed. So, there you go. Some Pacific Northwest weirdness. My eggs uncracked. So, I always check my eggs at the store, of course, but some eggs that I took home ended up cracking in my fridge, specifically 2 in the back. It's no big deal. It happens sometimes when they're set too high up in my fridge and they freeze a bit. They expand and then they crack. I made note of it and I ate all but those 2 eggs, plus 1 uncracked one that day, and forgot about the whole thing. I left them in the container because they weren't cracked enough to leak or anything, and I wanted them to be in the styrofoam packaging when I threw them away. Anyway, today, I go to make some eggs and I use the one left that's in the carton, and to my surprise, there's only 2 eggs in there. The ones that should be broken, but now they are completely fine. There's not a scratch on them. I even took pictures of them as I was so shocked. But then I quickly realized that it was just a picture of 2 normal-looking eggs. I ate them up this morning, but now I'm wondering where that 3rd egg went. Maybe the parallel universe of me was 1 extra egg hungry in the other timeline. This story was sent to my inbox at derekwebersubmissions@gmail.com. It's from somebody named Joshua. They say, I'm still in a dream. Hey, I found your channel on YouTube and I just wanted to share an incident that happened to me, and it still has me wondering if I'm living in a dream. A couple of years ago, I was going to watch the Super Bowl with my family at Chili's in Bullhead, Arizona, and afterwards, we decided to go for a drive on this empty road where you can see the Colorado River, and I decided to look out of the window to look at the river, and then I saw a blue light crash into the river. Now this is where things start getting weird. I look around the car to see if anyone else saw it, but everyone looked like they were frozen and just staring at the road. We were really close to the river, and the light was bright, so there was no way that they could have missed it. I give it about 2 minutes before I asked them if anyone saw that blue light crash into the river, and they all said no. After we got home, I wasn't really thinking about what had happened, and I went to go lay down and go to bed, and I closed my eyes for like 5 seconds. I mean, literally, 5 seconds. And I opened them up and it was already morning. I got up, I looked out my window, and the sun was up. I thought that I was, lucid dreaming or something. But I remember going to school and waiting by the bus stop thinking about what happened. It's just weird to think if I never woke up from that dream, even if it is a dream. I don't know what happened, but it's definitely too weird for me to think about. Thanks, Josh. This is another email submission from Carrie. She says, "Hi. I really like how you read and the quality of the recordings. I wanted to share 2 glitches that I've experienced. I've never shared them previously online, as the Glitch in the Matrix subreddit only allows posters with certain amounts of karma, and since I don't use Reddit that often, I don't have as much karma as I need to post. Anyway, here's the first story. This event took place in 2022. I live in East Midlands, UK, and at the time, I was working as a customer service advisor for about half a year. The office wasn't close to my home, and I had to walk approximately 20 minutes to the bus station, where I had one bus only, which would take me to a nearby town/village where the corporation had their offices. As only one bus could take me there, and it was every half hour or so, I always took the 7:10 bus to get there on time. It was winter morning, before 7, so it was still dark outside. As every day, I went to the bus station, but due to ice on the pavement, I was a little bit slower, and I was there exactly when the bus was starting. I quickly checked whether if it was the right bus or not. I confirmed with the driver, and after purchasing a ticket, I went to my usual seat. Now, when I say my usual seat, I mean it. I suffer from quite severe motion sickness ever since I was a kid, and the place in which I sit on any moving vehicle can either ease my discomfort or worsen it. Therefore, I always choose the second row on the left side. And in the UK, the driver's on the right side. I need to be able to watch the road. There's not many people traveling to this village at that hour, so the bus is usually empty at the start. So I was pretty much always able to take my preferred seat. As I go to take my seat, I sit down and I lean against the window. I put some music in my earbuds and I watch the sleepy city slowly give way to the darkness of the nearby forest. I remember having at one point a thought that we're doing this trip a little bit quicker than usual, which is great as I don't like to be on the bus, maybe for obvious reasons. But when I checked the time, we were going at the same pace as always. I thought it was weird, but I guess I quickly forgot about it. During the ride, of course, there were a couple of people who went in and out, so I wasn't alone during the entire ride. However, it was still relatively empty, so no one was sitting right next to me. I was holding my phone to switch between songs every once in a while. I closed my eyes and I leaned back. Finally, the time came when we were getting close to my stop. I remembered the moment that I was getting ready to get up, holding my phone with one hand and holding onto the pole inside a bus with the other. We stopped and I got up. I exited the bus and one other girl stepped out of the bus with me, and then the bus drove away. And then my headphones stopped working. That's when I realized I don't have my phone. It's not in my hands or in my pockets, and my headphones obviously can't connect to my phone now anymore. And yeah, the phone was still on the bus. It was later confirmed when I checked its location via Google, and it showed a village at the end of the bus's route. Now, the fact that I'd lost my phone was very stressful, of course, but only after me telling my friends about this event, I realized that something is wrong. I went to the left side of the bus in the beginning of the ride, which means when getting up, I would have to go to the right to step off of the bus. But when I got off the bus on this trip, I went to the left. Because at this point, which I also remember very well, I was sitting on the right side of the bus, second row, behind the driver. So at some point, I must have switched seats. I remember exactly sitting down on the left side and watching the forest, but my only following memory was me preparing to get up while being on the right side of the bus. The following morning, when I was back on that same bus, I saw the same girl who got off with me the previous day, and I asked her, "Do you remember which side of the bus I was sitting on?" And she confirmed that I was sitting on the right side behind the driver. But honestly, I would never choose to sit there, as it makes me more nauseous and carsick. To this day, I don't know what happened there. Why do I have this break in my memory? Where was I really sitting? And how did I lose my phone? Of course, now due to the phone being taken, someone has tried to access my profiles, even my Microsoft Teams, which scared the living daylights out of me due to the fact that they could post any of my selfies for fun. I tried to get police involved and get the CCTV from the bus. However, due to the bus route being in 2 shires, neither of the police departments wanted to take this, and the bus company said that only police is able to access the CCTV. So, I've never gotten my phone back. and I've never seen the footage which would prove what happened that morning. And I guess to the person who's taken my phone, thank you for not sending any of my selfies to my boss. I appreciate that. Sorry for your eyes though, but hey, instant karma, I guess. Carrie goes on to say that story number 2 will be in a different email as it takes some time to write. Was someone in my house? Or am I experiencing mental issues? Something odd happened today, and I want to put it out there to see if anyone else can come up with a logical explanation. I live in a house with my mom and my dog. Earlier today, my mom left the house and went out. I heard her leave, so I'm now alone in the house with the dog. About 20 minutes later, I went downstairs to put some dirty clothes in the washing machine. I put the clothes and the detergent in. I closed the door and turned the machine on. The machine has a dial that you turn to select your desired washing setting, and then you press the on button. It definitely started washing because I heard it make the usual noises, and I saw the clothes start to spin inside the machine. I then got my dog ready to go on a walk, left the house, locked the doors, and went to walk my dog. Now, when I got home an hour later, my mom was still out, by the way, and had not come home yet. This is 100% confirmed. The washing machine was turned off. Not in the sense that the cycle had finished, but the dial had physically been turned to the off setting. I double-checked and the clothes inside were still soaking wet, meaning the cycle hadn't finished and the machine was turned off mid-cycle. I don't know. I have zero explanation for this. The dial doesn't turn itself automatically as it's not that type of machine. The only explanation that I can think of is either someone else is or was in the house while I was out and switched it off. And this is scary because only my mom and I have keys to the house, or I myself switched it off, which is not something I would have chosen to do as it was literally mid-cycle washing my clothes, and I have no memory whatsoever of doing so. Both of these are very scary to me. I mean, obviously, the possibility of someone else being in the house is terrifying, but also the fact that I may have subconsciously performed an out-of-character action and have no memory whatsoever of doing it, also scary. Does anyone else have a possible explanation? Please note, I'm a 29-year-old female, physically healthy, although I could go to the gym a little bit more often, and have never been formally diagnosed with mental health issues. Like I'd been upstairs the whole time. I tried to post this earlier this year, but didn't have enough karma. I'm excited that I get to now because I've never met anyone with a similar experience until I found this group. Around Christmas, 2023, I had put my son down for a nap in his playpen in the playroom downstairs. I went into the living room, sat on my couch, and started watching The Office on TV and folding laundry. When I was finished, I pulled my blanket over me and laid down on the pillow that my son had brought into the living room earlier that morning. I dozed off soon after. A short time later, I woke up to my baby crying. I remember looking out the window and wondering how long I'd been asleep because it was dark outside. I checked my phone that was plugged into the charger on the arm of the couch for the time. It was almost 7. I specifically remember looking at the Christmas tree as I walked by. I walk back to the playroom to change his diaper. I walk into the kitchen to throw away the diaper and make him a bottle. And after I gave him his bottle, I walked back into the living room to lay down on the couch. But my pillow and my blanket were gone. The laundry was still folded beside the couch, and it looked untouched. Even my phone was gone. I looked in all the rooms that I had gone in, and even the bathroom, and thought it must have fallen in the couch. Around that time, my boyfriend was getting home from work, and I asked him to call my phone because I couldn't find it. I heard it ringing upstairs in our bedroom. Now, I hadn't been upstairs at all, and I was kind of freaked out at this point. Me and my boyfriend go up to our bedroom to find my phone plugged up to the charger beside my bed. And on the bed was my blanket and my pillow, as if I was asleep in my bed the whole time. I was so confused because I know for a fact that I never walked up or down those stairs, and the TV in the living room was still on the office. I still think about it all the time, and the only way that I can make sense of it is just me having experienced a glitch. My hoodie. My favorite hoodie has been missing for 3 weeks or so. My apartment is very neat and organized. There's no laundry piled up. The kids' rooms are as clean as a whistle. There's nothing under the beds. I searched my place from top to bottom, and a friend who was over did the same. No hoodie. I remember taking it out of my locker at work, and try as I might, I couldn't definitively remember taking it inside. But I walk home from work. It's a 7-minute walk, and I don't stop anywhere. I grab my things from my locker and just go. So I've been very confused about how the hoodie could be lost. Yesterday morning, I get up, and my hoodie is under my bed. Under the corner of the bed in the middle of the room, not any of the corners touching the walls. I'd looked under my bed repeatedly, and so had my friend. I've vacuumed the entire room, including under the bed, since the hoodie's disappearance. There's no way that it's been under there, and I haven't seen it. I feel crazy and confused. Hey, it's me. If you have a favorite hoodie, tell me about it in the comments. The corner store reappears. I used to live in an apartment near a corner store on the edge of town. I was very familiar with it and went there often. It was closed down a few months after I moved somewhere about a mile away, and I remember because it was still the closest store to where I lived. I remember my roommate telling me the store closed down. I was disappointed, because now we had to walk a little bit further down the road to the next gas station to get snacks and beer. It was July. I even saw that all of the equipment from inside the store was lined up outside to be taken away or something. It was about August when I walked past it again, and it was rubble. I could now see the buildings behind the store, and I remember thinking about that being the closest public restroom to my house, too. I continued on past what used to be the corner store to the next one down the road. I saw a friend of mine the same day, and I told him that they tore down the old store too. I didn't walk that way for a couple of months after that, and I hadn't walked that way until this October. When I did, I was very shocked and confused when I saw the building still there in its original condition. There's no way that I could have mistaken it for another building. Nothing else in the area was torn down or rebuilt. I got kind of mad, honestly, because of how blatant of a change that is. I decided not to ask my friend if they remembered me telling them about the store being rubble, because I really don't want to know the answer. We have some wisdom in the comments that says, "Have you looked back on Street View? Some areas are sampled quite frequently. If anything like that ever seems to happen," and this person is not just talking to the OP, they say to gather evidence, take pictures, video, get souvenirs, talk to people. Of course, we can't know that this store would reappear, but there are a ton of stories here where a place just seems to inexplicably close and then come back. Get some proof, even if just for your own memories. My experience paying too much attention at a fast food job. Before I dive into this story, I want to clarify that I'm not just imagining things or missing details. I'm hyper aware of my surroundings, and I pick up on every little thing that I focus on. It's a bit of a curse, honestly, since I can't seem to turn it off. Many things that I've encountered seemed supernatural at first, but after thinking about them, I usually find logical explanations. Still, some experiences just don't make sense. I've been working at a fast food chain for 2.5 years, part-time before I graduated, and now full-time, including past summers. I've seen things that genuinely defy explanation. I'll start with some minor oddities and build up to the stranger events. For starters, customers always arrive in waves. Our restaurant is right next to a busy freeway, surrounded by casinos and malls, so there's non-stop traffic outside, sometimes bumper to bumper. You'd expect the customer flow to be random, but it's not. They only ever come in waves, usually groups of 3 or 5. Outside of the early morning, it's never just one customer unless it's one of our regulars. It's like a bizarre pattern, almost like something out of Plants vs. Zombies. I'll get into a specific story about this soon. The customers in these waves are often totally mismatched, both in appearance and behavior. Picture this: an older white woman driving, a 12-year-old passenger in the seat, and a middle-aged man in the back. It's always an odd mix, and no matter how cheerful or helpful I am, they're usually irritated and passive-aggressive. I try to provide the best customer service that I can, greeting them, communicating clearly, and wishing them well, but 9 out of 10 customers still seem annoyed, and some even go out of their way to get under my skin. One of the strangest things is when they just get lost. This usually happens when only one customer is in line. They pull up to the menu, place a complicated and expensive order, and I tell them to pull forward to the window, and then nothing. We have CCTV camera in the drive-thru, which lets us monitor cars the whole way through. The drive-thru is enclosed with high curbs on either side and a chain-link fence, or at least some trees running along the edges. They can't just disappear. If they backed out, we'd see them, or at least hear a beep on the headset, yet somehow they're just gone. This happens at least once a month. Customers' behavior also changes based on who's working. It almost seems tailored to annoy whoever's on the headset. I've learned to keep a calm, detached mindset to avoid getting too frustrated, but the more irritated you are, the worse it gets. We have a night manager with a short temper, and as soon as he clocks in, we're bombarded with difficult customers. However, when I'm working with another manager who's into spiritual stuff, like me, our shifts are much quieter. The other day, my mood took a nosedive after a family call, and immediately we got swarmed with customers for hours, all demanding and all difficult. One time, my boyfriend was on the drive-thru late at night, and a woman came through ordering a number 9 medium. Immediately after, she ordered again, this time a number 9 small. Same voice, same woman, just slightly different. At the window, there she was again, the exact same person. It was like a doppelganger. What finally convinced me to write all this down was when I started counting the voices at the menu and the heads at the window. Sometimes it's like a chorus of random voices that I call the mumbles that eventually settle into one distinct voice. Or 2 people will order and only one person will show up at the window. Their behavior also fluctuates with the Schumann resonance. I keep tabs on it daily since it impacts my energy, and when the Schumann is off, our customers seem to go haywire. Everything gets turned up to 11. Sometimes, I wonder if the people running these franchises know something that we don't. Our location outperforms every other restaurant on this side of the state, yet management constantly demands we cut staff, refuse to fix things, and create rules that only make things harder. It's like they want to make us miserable, as if they're farming our negative energy. The Lion Ring Conspiracy. Okay, so a number of years ago, my brother and I bought a unit for our mother. It's a nice 2-bedroom place with a kitchen and a horseshoe-shaped bench with an oven that's seamless with the stovetop, as is the front of the oven all the way to the floor. Now, a few months ago, we had an issue with the fan belt in the oven needing it to be replaced. Here's where it gets weird. About 6 months after we bought the unit, I went over wearing a brass lion ring, and my mom loved it, eventuating in me getting her one. She kept it in her ensuite bathroom next to the sink, and I recall seeing it countless times. Mine was kept in the center console of my car. Now, cut to the oven getting repaired. She had to take the oven out for some reason, and what did she find behind the oven? Mom's lion ring, which could have only been left there when they were building the unit. The ring wasn't in the bathroom anymore. We just have to put it down to a glitch. When I talked to the lady that did the repair, she confirmed that it could have only have been left on installation. OP confirms in the comments that the ring is the same ring that Mom had the whole time. Same size, same wear and tear, and everything. Teleporting dog? This happened a few nights ago, and I'm still weirded out by it. Sitting on the couch, and I hear my dog whining to come in. I let him in. I use the bathroom, which is very close to the back door, a quick pee, and sit back on the couch. As soon as I sit down, I heard my dog whining again. Probably no more than a minute or so since he came in. I ask my wife if she let him back out. She says no. I open the door. I hear him whining, but he's not at the door. My wife and I check the house. No doggy. no dog. We go back outside, hear him whining again, and this time, I found him stuck under the deck with a kid's wading pool in front of the entrance to underneath the deck. Did this dog teleport under the deck? Did I let a friggin' skinwalker in my house? There's no way to get under there from inside the house, and really the only way is from the mentioned entrance, which is essentially just a hole, which, as also mentioned, had a pretty big object in front of it. He was whining because he was stuck under there. Thankfully, my wife heard me let him in originally because I honestly thought I was losing my mind and imagining scenarios that never actually occurred. It's truly the strangest thing of this kind to ever happen to me. I still don't understand how he got under there. Somebody in the comments says, you should really ask your dog how he got under there. And that is some solid advice. The Gremlins did it. I recently read and commented on a post here about how something had seemingly vanished and, after some time, was found right where they had looked many times since the item was lost. I stated that I had had similar things happen in my entire life and that I always joked that it was the Gremlins, the mythical creatures, not the ones from the movie, that need to use whatever it is and then they'll return it when they're done. Well, cut to today. I needed to find something and it wasn't where it should have been. I looked all over, every single place that I could think of. My friend was here for a bit and he was helping me look, but it was nowhere to be found. I had finally given up and told my buddy that the Gremlins needed it and I'll get it back eventually. I walked over to the place where it should have been and I looked one more time before I sat down, just because I knew that was the last place that I had seen it and my brain just wouldn't let it go. I looked down and it's sitting right where it should have been, on the edge of the table, right where I had looked repeatedly over the previous 20 minutes or so. It was right in the open, not behind anything, and was in plain view of both of us. I told my friend to look, and when he saw what I was pointing at, his jaw dropped, and he looked up at me. How did that happen? We both looked there multiple times. You're standing right there, and I just saw that you were looking there. And I know you didn't just reach down and put it there. What the hell, man? The Gremlins did it, I'm telling you. I just told someone on Reddit about them yesterday when the same thing happened to them. This is 100% true as best as I can remember it. This kind of thing has happened to me countless times in my 49 years. There's a mention in the comments about the 1980s revival of The Twilight Zone, an episode called A Matter of Minutes, where the premise is that every minute of every day was a separate thing, and a set of people, all dressed in blue and using blue tools, would build the settings for each minute. Sometimes they would forget a small item, and then that item would be replaced in a different minute. Are we living in a world where gremlins just borrow things whenever they need them? Or are we living in a real-life matter of minutes? Bizarre, helpful paper came out of nowhere. I work in the mental health field as a case manager. I have a client who just got admitted to the inpatient unit, and I wasn't sure how to contact her in the unit directly, since patients have a different number. I worked here for about a year, and I'd left in July because I was supposed to go into teaching. Well, it didn't work out, so I started back up at this job 3 weeks ago, but I've lost pretty much all of those niche contact numbers and resources. I remembered that I had written the IPU patient contact phone line down, as different than the front desk, on a piece of paper and shoved it into my work phone case. We have little iPhones with the leather cases that have a few slots for cards and a pocket for money. I had turned that case in with my old phone months ago when I had resigned, and this was a different one. I remember thinking how old and banged up it was in comparison to my old one, which looked much newer. I figured that I'd call the front desk later and just get the number then, but I thought to myself, ooh, I wonder what the last person left in here. I opened the side pocket on the case, and there was a small slip of paper with the IPU patient contact number. It was mine. My handwriting, my font, my size, and it was written on a torn piece of paper from the IPU because there was typing on the back about staff expectations while on the unit. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm grateful, really, and I don't know if I'm looking out for myself somewhere out there, but that was weird. Like really, really weird. And I don't have an explanation for it.